Black Ops Chapter 1. Black Ops, Ozark, Alabama. A quiet small city, rich with history and old Southern charm. It sits just to the north of Fort Rutger Army Base, and has seen its share of Army brats over the years. The somewhat hilly terrain made the city seem so cozy. It was your typical Southern town. Rita, already late for school, ran in one of the back doors, still shoving papers into her backpack. She entered the hallway hoping against hope that she could just make it to class before the last bell. She ran down the hallway passing her locker even though she needed a book. She was 10 feet from the door when the bell rang. Mississippi Thomas, Principal Buxton sighed as he rounded the corner, report to the office. Yes, sir. Rita was defeated, disappointed. Her perfect record of non-tardiness was broken. She walked the hallway in no particular rush. She was officially late now. Rita was an average high school student. She did well in school and just might make valedictorian. The soft wavy curls of her dark brown hair hung in a ponytail as she moseyed down the hall to the front office. Her average height and athletic build made her look like the high school kid next door. She glanced at the trophy case near the office, thankful she was graduating in 6 months. Rita pulled the door open to the office, her mind wandering. She was thinking of the things she had to do during the day. Playing a conversation in her mind with her best friend Jason, knowing that he would listen to her gripes after school. Rita dropped her backpack outside the office and looked up to see a man with a gun turning to point it at her. She instinctively grabbed the gun and disarmed the man as she elbowed him in the nose. She threw the gun on the other side of the counter by the secretary's chair as she swept the man off his feet and planted him face first onto the floor. Mr. Charleston, the football coach and math teacher, and Mr. Maxwell, the history teacher, leaped the counter and held him on the floor as Mrs. Cunningham called the police and paged the school resource officer, placing the school on lockdown. Rita, are you okay? Mr. Charleston glanced over at her as he held the man down with Mr. Maxwell. Why, sir? Rita stood in shock as she looked at the man screaming on the floor. She broke my nose. The man's muffled yells echoed from the floor while the two men continued to hold him. I wish she broke more, Mr. Maxwell bellowed, much to Mr. Charleston's amusement. Rita, Mrs. Cunningham walked over to her as the first of the police cars arrived. Come here, baby, come behind the counter. Rita turned to see Mrs. Cunningham shaking. Rita, still in shock, looked over at Mrs. Cunningham. I'm tardy. Mrs. Cunningham chuckled a bit, more so out of relief, and smiled. I think you will be excused today. Mrs. Cunningham sat Rita in a chair near Mr. Buxton's office as the school resource officer, Chuck Daniels, and Mr. Buxton ran in from different directions. Officer Daniels handcuffed the man and began to search him, locating a second gun and additional ammo as other officers ran in. Is everyone okay? Captain Haynes looked around at the people in the office. He watched as Mr. Maxwell and Mr. Charleston released the suspect to Officer Daniels, and stood up to look around, both of them still a bit dazed by the event. Yes, officer, Mrs. Cunningham sighed and pointed to the man on the floor, everyone but him. The captain even thought she was gloating a bit. That little bitch broke my nose, the man yelled again as more officers came into the office and assisted Officer Daniels. Too bad she didn't have a chance to break more. Captain Haynes growled and motioned for the officers to remove him from the building. He glanced around the office, assuming the suspect referred to was Mrs. Cunningham. The gun was thrown behind the counter. Mr. Maxwell leaned toward Haynes, over by the wall over there. Mr. Maxwell pointed to the corner behind the counter that served as Mrs. Cunningham's desk. Another officer walked over to the gun and disarmed it. He turned to Haynes and set the now disarmed gun on the far end of the counter, 8-round mag, but it was fully loaded. Okay, I need you all to go to separate rooms and not to discuss anything. We are going to take your statements, Haynes announced officially to the school personnel in the office. He looked at Rita, surprised no one had pointed her out before. Rita? She looked up at him, happy to have the distraction from her thoughts. Yes, sir? Just sit tight, honey, I'll get John here in a minute. Rita nodded and returned her gaze to the floor. Captain Haynes looked over at Mrs. Cunningham and motioned for her to follow him to a corner. She was in here when this happened? Mrs. Cunningham raised her eyebrows, glanced at Rita, and then turned back to Haynes. That broke the man's nose. She looked over her reading glasses at Haynes, who looked surprised, but not particularly shocked. Haynes nodded in understanding. Can you stay with her? Y'all just don't talk about what happened. You got it, Tim. Mrs. Cunningham stepped over to where Rita was and sat in a chair next to her. Captain Haynes turned to Officer Smith. Call John, tell him he needs to come down to the school, and make sure he understands she's fine. Captain, Mr. Charleston whispered to him, you need to look at the video of what happened. The captain turned to him and questioned him with his look. Officer Randall Smith waited outside for Sergeant John Womack to arrive, but it wouldn't be long before John came screaming around the corner and jumped out of his patrol car. Rita? John was in a state of panic, thinking they may have just wanted him there calm before telling him she was injured. John, listen to me, she's fine. I told you that on the radio. Randall stopped John as he stepped toward the school. She was in the office when it happened, and they need to interview her. Randall could see the relief sweep over John. We need you present while she is interviewed. Right now you need to gather yourself together and be calm for her. John ran inside and headed straight to the office. He pushed his way in and saw Rita sitting behind the counter next to Mrs. Cunningham. Uncle John. Rita was relieved and began to cry, the weight of the situation finally hitting her. John walked over and hugged her. It's okay, sweetheart. You're okay. I wasn't even scared until it was over, Rita sniveled out as she held on to her uncle. It happened so fast. It's okay, he whispered calmly to her, not understanding the totality of the circumstances. He was just thanking God she was not hurt. I'm going to call Aunt Shelley and have her come down here, okay? Rita nodded and John tried to soothe her. Why don't you sit here and wait while I call her? I'll be right there in the hall if you need me. Rita nodded again and turned to return to her seat. John stepped out into the hall, got on his cell phone and called his wife. John, is Rita okay? Shelley was ready to burst into tears as she listened to the news on the radio. Honey, she's fine, but I need you to come to the school. John breathed a sigh of relief as he put a hand on the back of his head. Thank God she's fine. Thank God. Aunt Shelley felt a wave of relief and gratitude sweep over her. She ran, grabbed her purse, and, still in her slippers and bathrobe, she ran to the car without locking the door. John. Captain Haynes waved him over to Mr. Buxton's office. John walked in and they closed the door. You have to watch this. The captain motioned to the television on the wall. Mr. Buxton pressed a button on a DVR sitting on his desk, and John watched in awe as he observed the situation play out. Had she not done what she did, the captain turned to Sergeant Womack as Mr. Buxton stopped the recording. Her and possibly everyone in the room would have been killed. John chuckled and shook his head. She paid attention. What do you mean? Haynes turned to John, the confusion present in the captain's expression. You knew me and Shelley grew up with her dad. John looked over to Haynes, who nodded. We served together in the Marines and her dad had taught her some self-defense moves. John laughed softly, thinking back to that lanky 11-year-old who invaded their house. When we brought her home, she asked me if I could teach her some stuff. It made her feel like her dad was closer. John shook his head with a smile. She was a good student. Haynes nodded and chuckled himself. She was what, 11, when you and Shelley brought her home? John nodded and a grin formed on his face. That was the best decision we ever made. John stepped toward the door to the office, wanting to go back and check on Rita while they waited for Shelley to arrive. Captain Haynes opened the door to Mr. Buxton's office when John caught sight of Shelley running in the front entrance. Aunt Shelley came tearing into the school and was stopped by a couple of the officers at the office door. I'm her mother, she yelled at them and tried to push her way past the two. Let her in, Mathers, the captain shouted at one officer as everyone emptied out of Mr. Buxton's office. Shelley ran past everyone and over to Rita. Baby, are you okay? She knelt down in front of Rita and hugged her. Thank you, God. Aunt Shelley checked the girl for injuries. Thank you, God. Aunt Shelley held Rita's face and the two began to cry. Aunt Shelley grabbed Rita and held her close. John walked over to the pair and they all embraced. I can't stop shaking. Rita held out her hands and looked at them as they quivered in an unseen chill. It's okay. John rubbed her back, trying to soothe her. It's just the adrenaline. It might take a few hours to wear off, okay? John picked up the girl's chin. Rita, you did well. I just reacted. Rita shrugged and glanced up at Uncle John. It was just a reaction. You did well and you're okay. John pulled her close and held on to her. It's a good thing we worked on all that stuff. Rita chuckled and nodded as Mr. Buxton made an announcement to the faculty in the office. I talked to the superintendent. We are going to dismiss the kids and close the school for the police investigation until 2:30. At that time we will reopen the school for extracurricular activities. The kids, right now, will be dismissed from the east side entrance, so I need one of the officers directing them that way. Captain Haynes instructed an officer to tape off the area outside and stand by the front entrance to direct the parents. The superintendent is on his way, Mr. Buxton mentioned, walked over to the intercom and released the lockdown on the school. He quickly instructed the staff to escort their classes to the east side entrance buses and parents would be picking up there. The main hallway would be off limits to students and faculty until further notice. Captain Haynes had 2 officers tape off the main hallway and the walk leading up to the front entrance. No one would be allowed in the area except necessary personnel. Captain Haynes spoke to the chief, and the chief decided to call in the Alabama Highway Patrol to investigate, due to the fact an officer's child was involved. The chief also advised he would soon be en route after being pulled from a meeting by his assistant. Detectives from the Alabama Highway Patrol soon arrived to interview the witnesses and collect any evidence. Detective Michaels viewed the security camera footage and knew there was something different about Rita, a good kind of different. He had injected himself into this investigation when he heard the call go out over the police band. The suspect is about to shoot the secretary. Detective Michaels pointed to the screen as the video played for a 3rd time. Mr. Buxton looked at the video closer. How do you know? Rewind it about 5 seconds. Detective Michaels glanced over at him and stepped over to the monitor. Look right here. Detective Michaels pointed to the hammer on the gun. You can see the hammer coming back. It was plain as day once it was pointed out. Now, here is where the door is opened. She drops her backpack, still oblivious he's there. The hammer goes back down, he turns to aim it at her. She looks up, and 2 seconds later he's flat on his face with a broken nose. Detective Michaels turned to Mr. Buxton. Who was he looking for? Mrs. Cunningham said he couldn't give a name of who it was, just that it was a female student, and that she would be a junior or a senior. Mr. Buxton turned the video off and stepped over to flip on the light switch. He was demanding that all female students in those 2 grades be brought to the office one by one so he could question them. Does anyone have any idea who he is? Detective Alexander stepped up and looked to the officers in the room. Captain Haynes looked over at Detective Alexander and the other troopers. His prints identify him as Connor Gray, out of Long Island, New York, no criminal history, just a few traffic tickets. Y'all got him on ice? Detective Alexander looked over at the captain. Nice and chilled, just waiting for y'all to come collect him. The captain nodded and stepped to the door. My guys will stay here and help with anything you all need, and the chief will be here shortly, but I need to head to the station and get a press release done. Thank you, Captain. Detective Alexander stepped over and the 2 men shook hands.